You all thought Atlanta was a messy race for the playoff drivers? Wait until we talk about the Glen. Hey everyone, it's Taylor Kitchen and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line, where we do motorsports media your way, talking about NASCAR literally all the time. And this weekend we were at the Glen, the first road course of the playoffs, and it was messy. We went into our 12th overtime of the season this race. 12th. That is a record for the Cup Series. And oh my goodness, I didn't like going into the overtime, but it led to an incredible moment that is just going to go down in the history books as one of the best finishes in Watkins Glen history. It was Chris Buescher and Carson Hocevar on that front line on that final overtime restart, but not for long when SVG, who was behind them, got his nose to the bumper of the 17, taking them 3 wide and getting to the lead himself, but that lead did not last long. It was actually a mistake by the road course pro that got him out of contention for that victory, because Chris Buescher was able to take advantage of that mistake through the S's to get the lead and get his first win of this season. It's such a bittersweet win for the 17 team. Sweet because there were so many that they missed out on this season, and finally getting a win is just such a good feeling. But it's bitter because if this win would have happened 3 races ago, this win would have locked them into the playoffs. So unfortunate there, but again, a win is a win. Great job to the 17 team and Chris Buescher, who had a very strong car all race long. They had the race winning strategy and they were able to get the win from the pro who made a mistake. So we have Buescher in first, Van Gisbergen in second, third Carson Hocevar, the best finish of his NASCAR Cup Series career, and a great day for Spire altogether. I know we're going to talk about that caution on lap 1. That was a cause of Corey LaJoie, but all Spire cars finished inside that top 10. We have Zane Smith in 5th, and then we have Corey LaJoie in 8th. Right between the Spire cars in 3rd and 5th is Ross Chastain winning the pole for this race in 4th. Jumping ahead to Chase Briscoe in 6th. By the way, he is the highest finishing playoff driver of this race, and only 2 playoff drivers finished inside the top 10. That is him in 6th, and then we have Austin Cindric in 10th. The 2 drivers, 2 of I think maybe 3 or 4 drivers that we would have considered first round exits for sure for that round of 16, finishing inside the top 10 ahead of the rest of the playoff field. And don't worry, we're going to get to that. But for Chase Briscoe, he said after the race, he probably could have gone for some more points at the end, some more positions, but he decided to play it safe, which I think is the name of the game for this first round of the playoffs, as I think drivers are taking way too many unnecessary risks, and it's getting them into a points hole way too soon. But Briscoe, very methodical with this race, a very nice run for him. An underestimated road course racer, in my opinion. Rounding out the top 10, we have Michael McDowell in 7th. Again, Corey LaJoie 8th. 9th, Ryan Preece. Fantastic finish for him. And then 10th, of course, Austin Cindric. That brings us into the points. How does this shake up the point standings, knowing that only 2 playoff drivers finished inside the top 10? Because for Chase Briscoe, he came into this race minus 21. He was below that cutoff line. He's leaving this race 6 points to the good. Now below that cutoff line, we have Denny Hamlin minus 6, Brad Keselowski minus 12. He had a rough race. Martin Truex Jr. minus 14, and minus 20, Harrison Burton. Looking at the drivers above Chase Briscoe in points, they're pretty solid. They should be good heading into Bristol, but how did we get here? Because there were only a few playoff drivers that didn't have any mistakes during the Watkins Glen race. Let's start from the back of the field to the front of the field, talking about those 16 playoff drivers, starting with Ryan Blaney, who did not finish this race due to an incident on lap 1. This was the incident with Corey LaJoie that I mentioned earlier, where he just got onto the curb too much and then collected Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch went around, then other cars went around. Ryan Blaney just unfortunately caught up in the stack up and had significant damage. Where he was frustrated with this from NASCAR's point of view is that he was towed back to the garage area as opposed to being towed back to pit road. He felt that his car didn't have significant enough damage that wouldn't have allowed him to continue the race. He said his team should have at least had the opportunity to look over the car, fix some damage under the DVP clock, but instead, because he could not wheel the car back to pit road under his own power, NASCAR decided to tow the car to the garage area. And when looking at the NASCAR rules, according to Bob Pockrass, NASCAR allows for towing to remain in the race for mechanical issues, but not for damage. And unfortunately for Blaney, it was the damage that did not allow him to finish this race in NASCAR's eyes looking at the rule book. So really unfortunate situation there. I understand the frustration from Blaney, especially looking at the past 4 races. He is DNF'd in 3 of those. Really not good heading into the playoffs for the 2023 champion. Not how you want to see things work out, but again, how the points shook out with this race, knowing that so many other playoff drivers had issues, he should be fine going into Bristol. You have Tyler Reddick in the 27th position. He had a spin, just not the day that he needed. And then around him, you have Brad Keselowski in 26th and William Byron in at 34th. And they had a really scary incident towards the end of the race. With roughly 7 to go in the race, Logano clipped the left rear of Keselowski, which sent Keselowski sideways. When that happened, Byron got into the back of Keselowski and launched him to the top of his car, the tire actually going into the window net of the number 6. Luckily, the window net was strong enough to keep the tire out of the cockpit of the car. But nevertheless, that was terrifying and something I've never seen at Watkins Glen before. So a bad day for Brad Keselowski with 2 pit road violations made worse with this, getting him in the 26th position. And of course, William Byron, the previous winner at Watkins Glen last year, finishing this race in at 34th. Hendrick Motorsports as a whole just did not have speed going into this weekend at all from practice and qualifying. Then we have Harrison Burton finishing in that 24th position. He ultimately had a decent race until 11 to go. He had a left rear tire go down, it unraveled, and then we had a debris caution for that. So unfortunate for him, he had that issue. Otherwise, I think he would have had a decent finish. Then you have Denny Hamlin finishing in 23rd. Like I said earlier, he is 6 below that cutoff line. That strategy at Atlanta did not play out at all. They were way too conservative at that race. This race just had multiple things not go their way involved in that incident on lap 1. So from the start of this race, it was not good for that 11 team. So they know the situation going into Bristol. They're not in a must-win situation, but they have to be flawless. And that is something that 11 team has not been able to accomplish in the playoffs so far. In 22nd, we had Ty Gibbs, which what I'm remembering is he didn't really have any egregious issues during this race, if none at all. They just did not have the speed. But let's talk about Martin Truex Jr. finishing in that 20th position. He was clearly very frustrated after the race, saying things like, quote, "It's just crazy that all these races always come down to this. I don't really understand how guys can call themselves the best in the world when they just drive through everyone on restarts at the end of these races." And then he said, "I'm out of here." And I don't blame him. That was kind of a nightmare coming down to that checkered flag. Just all the random cautions, just bizarre. He caught some damage from incidents on track 2. Again, the bad luck for Martin Truex Jr. continues. Bad luck this race as well for Chase Elliott, who was in that 19th position. Again, a driver who we would have thought would do well considering how good he is at road courses. Just was not in the cards for that 9 team. He was involved in an incident with Todd Gilliland, had some toe link issues, and then he had some damage on the left front and the right front. Just, again, not good day for the playoff drivers. Let's keep rolling talking about these playoff drivers anyways, because Alex Bowman was one of the handful of playoff drivers that was mistake-free, finishing in that 18th position. It really was just a strategy call that put him back there, but in my opinion, he was one of the best performing Hendrick Motorsports cars all day long, getting valuable points. 15th, we have Joey Logano. The off finishing position doesn't really matter in my opinion, just because they're already locked into the round of 12. They were also involved in that incident with Brad Keselowski. So overall, a fine day for that 22 team. Then we move on to Christopher Bell, who was spun trying to get to pit road by Austin Dillon. That set them back a little bit. Then we have Daniel Suarez in 13th, getting into the gravel, set him back a little bit earlier in the race. And of course, messed up some strategy for SVG and Ross Chastain that ultimately didn't get messed up because of how the cautions fell. Then you have Kyle Larson in 12th, and now I am out of breath. But Larson had a pit road violation, a vehicle interference with the 43 pit stop. But that was all the issues for the playoff drivers, or at least how all the playoff drivers finished this race. And if you look at the points, the mistakes or ability to salvage a good race show and how we go into Bristol. If you would have told me that Bowman would have been 4th and Chase Briscoe was above the cutoff line, I would have also said you're probably crazy. But to my credit, I have Chase Briscoe moving on to the next round. So fingers crossed that happens so my bracket doesn't get as badly hurt as it looks like it is going to with the shockers that we have below that cutoff line right now. With all that said, this race was chaotic. It was crazy. There was a lot of big storylines going into this race, but how did they all shake out? Well, I will say the battle on that last lap was phenomenal. The battle that we would have had if we didn't have a caution to put us into an overtime finish would have been incredible as well. Seeing SVG try to track down Chris Buescher. But do the last few laps of the race make up for kind of the mess we saw that was Watkins Glen? Yes and no, because within that was great strategy, and we also had this whole storyline around the tire that was supposed to have 3 seconds of fall off, and it was supposed to be this really big deal. but it wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be going into this race, to be quite honest with you, because we saw guys like SVG and Ross Chastain stay out on the track, and they were able to stay out on the track in front of the field for so long. It felt like the tire didn't make a big difference. It was an improvement. Let me be clear. It was definitely an improvement, but it didn't create, I think, the varied strategy that I think NASCAR and Goodyear would have expected. We had great strategy. There were a few different strategies in play, but it didn't create, I think, the excitement that we had hoped this tire would. I will say the officiating for this race was a little bit frustrating as well. Obviously, the NASCAR rulebook came into play there, which was understandable. Some of the cautions, I felt like we waited way too long to pull a caution. It was a weird race at Watkins Glen, but it was also really fun. So that kind of puts me in that 50% kind of above the yellow line, below the yellow line, on the line. But I'm going to raise the bar a little bit for it. So I'm going to give it a 65%, which is above the yellow line. Do I want Watkins Glen in the playoffs in the future, if possible? I think yes. I would like to give it another shot. Obviously, it will not be in the playoffs next year. But if it has a chance to be back in the playoffs, because it was a sold-out crowd, I would actually like to give it another shot. So the Glen back in the playoffs in the future, would love it. This time, it was a little rocky in my opinion. But what were your thoughts on Watkins Glen? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, for more NASCAR news, make sure to go to TobyChristieCom. And to hear more about us, what we do, get your ATYL merchandise, go to AboveTheYellowLine.com. But that is it for this episode of Above the Yellow Line. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends and family. We are going to go live Thursday night talking all things Watkins Glen and previewing the cutoff race to end the round of 16 at Bristol, happening on Saturday, by the way, a Saturday night race. So should be a fun time, but we will see you then. Again, thank you all so much for watching this video, and until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.